I had always believed that family was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where love and trust were unconditional. Growing up, I had watched my sister, Leela, glide through life like everything was handed to her on a silver platter, while I fought tooth and nail for every small victory. I had spent my 20s and 30s working 2 jobs, scraping through late nights and early mornings. Also, we could have a stable home, a roof over our heads, and a semblance of comfort. I thought Leela understood that. I thought she knew the sacrifices I had made, that my love for her wasn't conditional on her gratitude. Leela was charming in a way that made it easy for her to get what she wanted. Her smile could disarm, her laughter could captivate, and her pleas could bend even the strongest of wills. I had always tried to shield her from life's harsher truths, paying her bills when she ran short, lending her money for her impulsive adventures, and listening patiently when she complained about the world, and she had always thanked me. Or at least I thought she did. It wasn't until that Thursday evening, with the hum of my laptop filling the silence of my apartment, that the illusion shattered. A notification blinked insistently in the corner of my screen. A charge of $12,700. My chest tightened. I clicked, thinking it was a mistake, but it wasn't. The description read, "Luxury Getaway Package Bora Bora." My fingers trembled. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. Leela, of course it was Leela. I could already hear her sweet, persuasive voice in my head, spinning a tale that made her irresponsible spending sound like a right I owed her. I called her immediately, my voice trembling between disbelief and fury. "Leela," I said, trying to keep my composure. Did you really charge $12,700 on my credit card for a trip to Bora Bora?" "Oh, that," she said, breezy and casual, as if it were a minor inconvenience to her. "Don't worry about it. You'll understand it's like for my mental health. You've always taken care of me anyway." My throat went dry. For your mental health, my hard-earned money was now funding her escape from responsibility. I could hear the edge in my own voice, though I tried to stay calm. "Leela, you can't just do this. That's thousands of dollars on my card. You didn't ask." I know," she interrupted, feigning guilt. "But it's fine. You don't mind, right? You're always the responsible one. You'll figure it out." Her words cut deeper than any blade could. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal, the casual disregard for my life, my work, my sacrifices. The sister I had loved unconditionally, the one I had always protected, had just thrown all of that away. I sat back, the weight of exhaustion and disbelief pressing down on me. My heart ached not for the money, but for the trust I had placed in her, for the bond I had believed unbreakable. And beneath the pain, a small, cold ember began to glow, a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to entertain before. She's going to pay for this. She doesn't get to treat me like this and walk away unscathed. For the first time in my life, I realized that love without boundaries wasn't kindness. It was weakness. And that weakness had a price. The days after the credit card shock were unbearable. Every morning, I woke up with the taste of betrayal still thick on my tongue, and every night, sleep eluded me as my mind replayed Leela's casual laughter, her flippant excuse for spending $12,700 like it was pocket change. I had loved her fiercely, protected her blindly, and in return, she had treated me as though my existence was merely a safety net for her whims. The realization burned hotter than any anger I had felt before. It wasn't just theft, it was contempt, a deliberate dismissal of everything I had sacrificed for her. I wandered through the apartment, staring at the walls we had both decorated, thinking about every time I had shelled out money for her little whims, the designer shoes, the fancy dinners, the trip I had helped fund without complaint. Every memory now carried a sting, a reminder that my generosity had been weaponized against me. I felt violated, humiliated, and powerless, and it was a feeling I hated. Powerless. That word echoed in my mind. a constant reminder of what I could no longer allow. Leela had lived in my inherited house for years, renting it below market, always finding ways to minimize her financial contribution. I had tolerated it, thinking family deserved kindness, but now I saw the truth. She had never respected me or my boundaries. She had been taking everything I gave her and treating it like a guarantee, a right, a perpetual indulgence. The ember of anger that had sparked in me the night of the charge began to grow. At first I fought it, telling myself that revenge was petty, that love should triumph even over betrayal. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't petty. This was justice. She needed to understand in a way she could never ignore that her actions had consequences. And I was going to make sure she did. I started watching her carefully and quietly, not out of obsession, but out of necessity. I observed how she strutted around the house, careless, oblivious to the fact that everything she had was built on my labor, my savings, my sacrifices. Her laughter, which had once been endearing, now grated on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. Every carefree meal she cooked, every late night party she threw, every unnecessary luxury she flaunted, it all fueled the fire inside me. I began to make a plan, not a reckless one, but precise. Every move had to hit exactly where it would hurt the most, not physically, but emotionally. I weighed options, calculated risks, imagined her disbelief when she realized that her comfort was not invincible, that her safety net could be removed without warning. And in my mind, I saw it clearly. The house, the very space she called her domain, slipping out of her grasp. It wasn't easy to picture. I had lived in that house for years. It carried my memories, my effort, my blood, sweat, and tears. But the thought of allowing her to continue exploiting my generosity was unbearable. If she was going to treat my life and labor as disposable, then she would have to feel the cost. By the end of the week, the plan had taken shape, precise and cold. There would be no yelling, no confrontation, no tantrums. She would be blindsided. She would feel the weight of what she had done, and I would reclaim not just my money, but my dignity. And in the quiet corners of my mind, a strange satisfaction began to settle in. For the first time in months, I felt powerful again. I was no longer the sister who forgave too easily. I was the one who would balance the scales, and she would finally understand that betrayal always comes at a price. The day I executed my plan felt strangely calm, almost surreal. Months of anger, sleepless nights, and careful observation had led to this moment. The house, my sanctuary, my fortress, the very place where I had nurtured family memories, was no longer just walls and memories. It was a tool, a final statement that Leela would never forget. I had arranged everything meticulously, the sale paperwork, the transfers, the notifications. Every detail was precise. There was no room for error, no room for hesitation. I watched her move through the house that morning, humming to herself, utterly oblivious. The expensive coffee she brewed, the throw pillows she had insisted on buying last month, the faint scent of her perfume in every room. All reminders of her carelessness, her audacity, her belief that I would always absorb her chaos. My heart tightened with a mixture of sorrow and anticipation. Sorrow for what we had lost, anticipation for the justice I was about to reclaim. The phone call came just as she stepped out for brunch. I let it ring twice before she picked up, her voice bubbly and unsuspecting. "Hey, guess what, Leela?" I interrupted, cold and steady. "The house. It's sold." There was a pause so long that I could almost hear the gears in her mind grinding. "Sold? What do you mean sold? But this is my home." Her voice cracked, rising with disbelief and panic. "I mean exactly that, sold, effective immediately." The sound of her inhalation, sharp and frightened, was almost satisfying. I imagined her pacing through the empty rooms, realizing that the life she had taken for granted, every comfortable chair, every room decorated to her taste, every corner that she had claimed as hers was no longer hers. She had never imagined that I could take this step, that I could reclaim not only the money she owed me, but also the power she had stolen through her manipulation. I could hear her stammering, trying to form words, to argue, to bargain. But there was nothing left to negotiate. The decision had been made, the papers signed, the ownership transferred. The house was gone, and with it, her illusion of safety and entitlement. My heart ached for the sister I once loved, but that ache was layered with a cold satisfaction, the knowledge that justice had been delivered, firmly and irrevocably. In the quiet that followed, I reflected on the irony of it all. I had loved her, supported her, and sacrificed for her, yet she had treated me as disposable. Now, in reclaiming what was mine, I had not just collected the debt she owed me financially, but emotionally as well. I had reminded her that actions have consequences, that carelessness and greed do not go unnoticed, and that betrayal carries a price heavier than she could have imagined. The house money cleared the $12,700 debt in full, with a little extra to cushion the blow. Watching the credit card balance zero out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't just money, it was dignity, respect, and a hard-won sense of closure. Leela would have to face the world now without the comfort of entitlement, without the belief that she could take without giving, without the illusion that I would always forgive her. I didn't revel in cruelty, I reveled in justice. The line between love and self-respect had finally been drawn, and I had crossed it for the first time in my life, not recklessly, but deliberately, with every ounce of careful thought and emotional fire I had nurtured since that fateful credit card charge. For the first time in months, I felt free. The silence in the house after Leela's departure was deafening. I had never realized how much space she had occupied, not just physically, but emotionally. Every corner, every shelf, every room had once held her presence, her laughter, her careless energy. Now the walls seemed to echo only with my own thoughts, the weight of both loss and relief pressing against me. I had won. I had reclaimed my dignity, my money, and my sense of control, but the victory was bittersweet. Leela didn't call immediately, and when she did, it was with a trembling voice that betrayed more fear than anger. "I can't believe you did this," she whispered, almost too fragile to hear. I didn't think you could." I didn't respond at first, letting the words linger between us, like the smoke from a long, extinguished fire. She had underestimated me for years, believing my patience and love were endless, my generosity boundless. That illusion had been shattered, replaced by a quiet certainty that I would no longer allow anyone to exploit me. "It was never yours to take," I finally said, my voice steady, calm, and without malice. "Everything I gave you was out of love. Everything you took without asking was a choice, and now you're facing the consequences of that choice." There was a long pause, and I could hear her tears behind the words she couldn't speak. I realized then that she had finally understood, though understanding came far too late, and only in the hollow way of someone who had lost everything. It was cruel, yes, but it was truth. In the weeks that followed, I watched from a distance as Leela struggled to rebuild her life. She moved into a small apartment she could barely afford, her carefree luxuries stripped away. The designer shoes and expensive trips were gone, replaced by the stark reality of bills and responsibilities she had never imagined facing. I felt a pang of sorrow, not for her plight, but for the relationship that had once been. The sister I loved, the one I had believed in, was still there somewhere, but the bond we had shared was fractured, perhaps irreparably. I walked through the now empty house one last time before the new owners moved in. The echoes of memories, the birthdays, the laughter, The small arguments that had always ended in hugs clung to the walls like a faint perfume. I touched the doorframe, ran my hand over the banister, and allowed myself a quiet moment of mourning. This house had been a part of me, and letting it go was both a necessity and a release. And yet, in that release, I found something precious: freedom. Freedom from manipulation, from guilt, from the endless cycle of giving while being taken for granted. I realized that revenge was not about cruelty. It was about reclaiming power, drawing a line, and protecting the life you have built for yourself. I didn't feel triumphant in a loud, boastful way. My satisfaction was quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in self-respect. I had learned the hard way that love without boundaries is dangerous, and that sometimes to protect yourself you must act decisively. The house was gone. Leela had learned her lesson, and I was left with something far more valuable than walls and rooms: my own strength. I finally felt capable of moving forward, unburdened by the weight of betrayal, ready to live a life defined not by others' whims, but by my own choices. And for the first time in years, I smiled softly, genuinely knowing I had not only survived, but reclaimed myself.